Welcome back to Vox Terra, and if you have not done so, please do subscribe. Raging tornadoes just blasted through Kentucky. So our question is, how does this tie in with a heating planet? Well, for that, I'm going to cite you from Yale 360, Redrawing the Map, How the World's Climate Zones Are Shifting. And that's a 2018 article. The world's climate zones are shifting. As well as a Yale Climate Connections article titled, Climate Change and Tornadoes? Any connection? Subtext, listen to the subtext, as greenhouse gases shuffle the atmospheric deck. Where and when twisters happen? Is it changing? And that's a 2021 article. So your starting point for all news analysis should just always be the ownership structure and advertising structure of the media, and what their incentives are to overlook these heating planet climate connections. And that incentive is called the fossil fuel petrochemical industry. And number two, your starting point for all events should be, we dump billions of tons annually of carbon and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Known heat-trapping greenhouse gases, and deny that or don't, there is no such thing as a free lunch. You're going to pay for altering the atmosphere either through lung disease or through climate change. One way or another, there's a price to be paid. Yet our media rarely advertise any of these extreme weather events, including the no-brainer events like heat waves, back to fossil fuel-initiated climate change. Now, tornadoes are a little less well understood, that climate connection. And therefore, sometimes it can be tough to get a scientist to come on the air and say, well, this twister wouldn't have happened in Kentucky but for climate change, because they got something called the 90% certainty rule. At least that's what Naomi Oreskes said in one of her works I read. But we can look at general trends, and we can look at general atmospheric weather patterns. And so could the media, like this one. Tornado Alley in the U.S. is shifting eastward. It's literally shifting eastward, and that's cited to both, and that's happening with the heating planet. I'm citing that to both the Yale articles for you. So any media outlet could just say, as the planet heats with the increasing greenhouse gases, Tornado Alley is shifting eastward. And you know it intuitively. You may even wonder, well, why the heck? I never heard about tornadoes in the Old South. That's what we used to call it, the Old South. And yet, if you watch the news, it's almost like they've always been there at this level. So citing to you from this here Yale article, there's something called the 100th Meridian. And that has literally shifted, listen to this, 140 miles east. Well, what they mean by that, because the meridian's a longitudinal line, so that's not going to shift. But the 100th Meridian is often is what they use to describe the line, the boundary of these arid western plains, meaning dry plain air from the plains regions, where they meet the wetter, moister eastern air. That boundary has been shifting eastward. Well, that's going to change weather patterns. And that should be news right there. The shift in the line is what we'd expect to keep happening because of climate change, and it will keep moving east as the planet keeps warming. And in keeping with what they'd expect with these climatic models, hotspots for tornado formation in the U.S. have shifted east 500 miles since the mid-1980s, along with shifts in temperature. So remember, people who want to defend, hey, let's keep burning fossil fuels, defend business as usual, or they just like nitpicking, being contrarian, they could say, well, we don't know the reporting, blah, blah, blah. But it matches the shift in temperature. So all media outlets could be reporting, again, sink it into memory, hotspots for tornado formation in the U.S. have shifted east 500 miles since the 1980s, along with shifts in temperature. Now, further down that article, the author brings up Kansas and the Wizard of Oz, and the author points out the Tornado Alley was the stretch from South Dakota to Texas that's infamous for destructive storms. But things are changing. Research shows that tornadoes are now more likely to hit homes some 500 miles to the east in southern states, including Tennessee and Alabama. So the author cited a study from Purdue University. Earth scientist Ernest Agee of Purdue University in Indiana and colleagues looked at tornado activity going back to the 1950s and compared the first 30 years of records to the next 30 years. In the first half of the study period, from 1954 to 1983, an area in Oklahoma was king, with a total of 477 tornadoes. But that area's tornado count decreased dramatically. by 45% in the second half of the study period from 1984 to 2013. Meanwhile, an equivalently sized area in the northern Alabama bumped up 48% to 477 large tornadoes. Tennessee's number of days of violent tornadoes doubled from 14 to 28 days, making Tennessee arguably the new Tornado Alley. Now, while being scientists, they agree that some of it could have to do with who's reporting and that kind of thing, but the shift in tornadoes matches up with a change in the weather. The eastern half of the U.S., and these are changes we should all know, everybody should know this, the eastern half of the U.S. was about 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer during the second half of the study. Well, who knows that? If you're out there like me and you're talking to people, look, it didn't used to be like this in July, or it didn't used to be like this in August, or whatever, right? How things are changing where you live. You might talk to somebody who's like, oh, no, come on, blah, blah, blah. But here it is. Actually, things are changing. It's documented. The general link between weather and tornadoes is fairly well established. Tornadoes, according to this article, need several things, including warm, wet, and buoyant air masses. Now, in the other Yale article, the one from Yale Climate Connections, they point out there about this shifting tornado alley. One of the explanations why they might be decreasing in those drier southern areas, those drier western areas, or traditional tornado alley, is because, quoting, strong multi-decadal warming observed across the U.S. Southwest, that increased heat may be generating air just above the surface that's hot enough to more reliably suppress, quote, tornadic thunderstorm development. Meanwhile, sea surface temperatures across the Gulf of Mexico are increasing, which helps to generate warm, humid surface air feeding into severe thunderstorms across the central and eastern U.S. So we need to act now. We got to support politicians who want to take climate action and lower emissions, and politicians who we think are going to do that but aren't. We got to remind them, hey, that's what we elected you for. And look, when you're out there talking about climate change, just keep the basic in mind. We're dumping billions of tons of carbon and other heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere annually. The Earth temperatures are going up, and that is shifting all weather patterns. Well, hey, I hope you found this video interesting, helpful, useful. And if so, please make sure you subscribe to my channel, you're commenting, you're liking. And if you want to give pushback that's going to help, keep the era of fossil fuels going, have at it, just be polite about it. But again, the more challenging argument to make is why we should be scaling back. And until next time, as always, peace be with you.